In the early 2000s, police discovered 2 dead bodies, bound by tape, practically mummified and severely decomposing. One of them was found in an abandoned suitcase on the side of a farm lane, while the other one was found literally inside the walls of a rental home in London. Both victims were very similar. They were young, beautiful South Korean women visiting London for their very first time, only to go missing and turn up dead months later. The way these women's bodies were found made it so obvious that the crimes were connected, but who could have done such a vile thing? Before we get into the case, I just want to thank Casetify for sponsoring this video. Casetify, good friend of the EleanorNeale channel. At this point, I feel like we're all using their phone cases. I mean, you know that I've been loyal to them for years. I have not used any other phone cases for so long now, genuinely, because theirs are the best. And I get so many messages from you guys almost every single day being like, I got a Casetify phone case using your code, using your link, like we're matching now. It's so fun. I feel like we're all joining the Casetify revolution. Their impact cases are such a classic. They're made with 65% recycled and plant-based materials. They're MagSafe compatible, so you can wireless charge, the little thing sticks. They come in so many cute designs, and of course you can customize them. I have customized so many over the years with my name, my initials, my surname, even my boyfriend's name, because I'm that kind of girlfriend. But Casetify do way more than just phone cases. I feel like I've told you about so many different things that they do, and now listen up if you're a girl boss like me, because they do laptop protection. I take my laptop almost everywhere I go. I don't know if that's an issue, maybe I'm girl bossing too close to the sun, but I work in coffee shops, I take it on the train, I took it on the plane the other day, and let me tell you, I'm very clumsy, I'm very destructive. When I put that laptop in my tote bag, God help it, because I bashed that thing off of every obstacle I walk past. But now I have this gorgeous impact case for my laptop. I'm gonna be careful with it. For my laptop. They have these little bumpers that help protect it if you're, well, you know, bumping it at any angle. It's protected on all 4 corners. And on the bottom, there's these like grippy anti-slippy pads that help your laptop stay secure. And I always go on my laptop on the train, and trust me, if you're a northern girly, you know how bumpy those countryside trains can get. Jesus Christ. Sometimes I fear that I won't even make it to the other end alive. But now, you and your laptop will make it to the other end alive. And you can even match your phone case to your laptop case if that's your thing, because they have a lot of the same designs over both of them. And I also have the cutest laptop sleeve ever. This is, of course, also from Casetify. Isn't she adorable? I mean, I've already told you how destructive I can be with my laptop, so a padded case like this that covers her completely is essential for me. So if you want to protect your phone, if you want to protect your laptop, if you want to protect pretty much any device that you have, they make so many different cases now. They have the phone straps, AirPod cases, iPad cases, Apple Watch straps. I mean, I don't have an Apple Watch personally, but best believe if I did, I would be all over a Casetify Apple Watch strap. That is so cool. So if you want to get 10% off of your order, you can go to casetify.com/Eleanor. The discount will be automatically applied at checkout. The link is also in the description down below if you want to just go and click it. Thanks again to Casetify for sponsoring this video. It means a lot. One last thing before we get into the case, I just want to give my usual disclaimer that I mean absolutely no disrespect to anyone that I talk about in this video. Everything that I'm about to say is publicly available information that myself and my team have found online and compiled into this video. This video will cover some sensitive topics, so viewer discretion is advised. If you feel like this video might be too intense or triggering for you, I would recommend that you click out now. Go look after yourself. Hopefully I'll get to see you some other time with a different case. And while we make every effort to fact check our sources and make sure that all of our information is correct, no action should be taken in reliance upon the information in this video. And I want to take this opportunity to remind you all that these are real people's lives that we're talking about, so please keep it kind and respectful in the comments section below. All opinions stated in this video are mine and mine alone, and with all that being said, let's get into the case. So today's case begins on the evening of November 18th, 2001 in a small North Yorkshire village. It was a freezing cold winter night. It was absolutely pouring it down with rain. The weather was utterly miserable, but things were about to get a lot worse. A local man was making his way to the pub that evening. He was walking down this very quiet country lane, and at this point it was dark, it was late, and he spotted an abandoned silver suitcase just sitting on the side of the road. It turned out that he wasn't the first or only person to have spotted this suitcase. It had been abandoned there on the side of this country lane for a couple of weeks at this point. It hadn't moved, no one had gone back to it, it hadn't been opened. Of course, no one really wanted to touch it. You wouldn't want to touch an abandoned piece of luggage. For multiple reasons. Of course, you have no idea what's in there. And also, this was a small village in North Yorkshire. People thought that someone had just lost their suitcase, and it would be quite rude for you to just help yourself, to just unzip someone else's stuff and go through it. So no one really had. It had been sat there for ages. But curiosity had gotten the better of this man as he was walking to the pub, and he decided to be nosy and take a quick look inside this suitcase. But as soon as he did, he really wished he hadn't. Once he cracked the zip, the first thing that he saw looked like a clump of human hair. And then as he kept unzipping it, he saw what looked to be a human eye. He felt sick to his stomach and immediately stopped prying, stopped unzipping the suitcase, and he just called for the police to come and check this out. Police officers came down really quickly, but they couldn't really do anything that night because, like I said, the weather was horrendous and they couldn't really move this suitcase. It could be a crime scene. It sounded like a crime scene. If that guy was correct and he had just found human hair and a human eye inside this suitcase, they didn't want to touch it. They didn't want to mess with any potential evidence. So what they did to protect this suitcase from the rain, they put a tent over the top of it and they just kind of sat and waited for the sun to come up in the morning so that they could actually look into it. They didn't want to take this case off to a lab or anything in case there was any other evidence on the ground. So yeah, they put up this tent and they just waited for the next morning when the sun would come up and the rain would stop, and then they could begin this investigation. And when they did, it turns out that man was right. What he'd found inside that abandoned silver suitcase was the dead, decaying body of a young woman. She was curled up into the fetal position and had been clearly very aggressively shoved into this suitcase. And it seemed like she'd been there for a very long time. I mean, we know that this suitcase had been on the side of the road for at least a couple of weeks, but her body was like a bluish purple colour, like very discoloured. You can just imagine the smell and everything. Like, she was very, very decomposed. The woman was naked, almost fully naked apart from a bra, and she had tape all over her face, kind of in the shape of a balaclava. So she was taped up all over her mouth, her nose, all over her head. The only thing that was kept free were her eyes, just so that she could see out. But this tape wasn't just any like normal tape. It wasn't packing tape. It wasn't duct tape. It was like a special kind of gift tape. It was very unique. It was blue and it had like paintings of men on it, men's heads and like standing men, I don't know, just like different men. It seemed like an art piece. Like, it was very nicely designed. It wasn't some like tacky gift tape from the pound shop. It was like a very, I don't know, a lot of thought had been put into this sellotape. It was a very distinctive pattern, is basically what I'm getting at. And as soon as police saw that, they had a lot of hope. This wasn't a kind of tape that they'd seen anywhere before. It wasn't the kind of tape that just anyone had in their drawer. They felt that this could be a very big factor of this case when it came to identifying either the victim or the killer. Right off the bat, police knew that they were really gonna struggle to identify this victim. Like I said, she was very, very decomposed, so an autopsy wouldn't be very helpful, and her face wasn't very visually recognizable anymore. She had no like identifying information on her. There was no ID, she had no purse, she had no tattoos or like distinctive birthmarks. Literally all they could tell about this victim was that she was an East Asian woman, and that is all they had. They couldn't tell her age, they really couldn't tell much. So police did the most thorough investigation that they possibly could without having much to go off of. They had no leads, they didn't even know who this poor woman was. There was very little progress throughout the investigation, I'll tell you that. They couldn't figure out who she was, who her killer was. They couldn't figure out where she'd come from, where she'd gone missing from, because of course there's a woman missing somewhere, but they couldn't connect a missing persons case to this Jane Doe body that they had just found. And that really worried them because this was clearly a very sadistic, brutal killing. I mean, her body was literally found ditched in a suitcase on the side of the road. She had a balaclava made of tape wrapped around her. Whoever had done this to her was still out there somewhere. It wasn't until a whole year later that there would be another development. In March of 2002, a maintenance worker in East London was called into a rental flat in Poplar to go and, I don't know, see to the bathroom, do some maintenance work, I guess. Now, Poplar in East London is about a 4.5-hour drive away from that small village in North Yorkshire where the body was found in the suitcase. But these two locations became very quickly connected. This maintenance worker gets to the flat. He was contracted to just do some like checkups on the bathroom. I don't really know what was going on, but as part of it, he had to take the panel off of the side of the bath. And when he did, a bunch of flies came out from underneath the bath, like a swarm of flies. Not a normal amount. It was totally bizarre. There was like hundreds of the fuckers. It was like they had been trapped under this bath waiting to get out for years. This builder knew that this wasn't good. It's never good when hundreds of flies are swarming around something. Flies, after all, are attracted to decomposition. As soon as he saw all of that under the bath, he didn't want to deal with it on his own, and I don't blame him. He immediately called the police to come and check this out. He wasn't going any further. So when the police arrived, they had a little look under the bath, and they realized that the flies seemed to be coming from like below the bath. But that was weird because there wasn't another room under the bath, so where the hell could all these flies have actually been coming from? Well, eventually, after a lot of searching, investigators came across a sealed off chamber hidden inside of the wall behind the bath. It had no handle, so from the outside you wouldn't have known it was there. But it was like this little sealed off room inside the wall. When they managed to get this door open, inside, well, the first thing that they noticed was a foul odour came out of this little chamber. It just filled the bathroom. And inside there were even more flies, all swarming around this big pile of clothes. And they noticed something kind of sticking out of the bundle. So one of them got a torch out and they shone it on this thing. And that was when they realised it was a human foot. They had just found another dead body in the walls of this rental apartment in London. When they got the body out, they realised it was another young woman, and she had been bound up with tape in almost the exact same way that the last one had. I will say now that it wasn't the same tape, it was just some packing tape, it wasn't that like artwork tape, but everything else was eerily similar. All her hands, wrists and ankles were bound up so that she wouldn't be able to move. Even her fingers, she'd had tape entwined between her fingers so that she literally couldn't move anything. Her face was also covered in this packing tape in that same balaclava-like way, but this time, this bottom half had been tied so tightly that her eyeballs had literally bulged out of her skull. And underneath all of that tape, stuffed inside her mouth, was a ball of socks, presumably to stop her from screaming as she was being taped up like that. Immediately, there are so many similarities between this body that they just found in London and that body that they found all the way up in Yorkshire. Both of the bodies were so devastatingly decomposed when they were found as well. They had clearly been in their own little vessels, just decaying for a long time before they were found. So, the police in London, they haven't quite connected these two cases yet, by the way. I'm jumping ahead a little bit because obviously they are connected. But right now, in London, the police have just come across this singular body in the walls of a random apartment. They don't know whose apartment this is, they don't know who lives there, so that's their first task, is to search this apartment, see if they can find any identification around. Unfortunately, they couldn't though. There really wasn't much of anything in this apartment that could give them any clues or any leads. In fact, one thing that they did find, it was called a mastic gun, and I'd never heard of one of these before, so I did a little bit of research. Turns out it's a gun that is used to seal things back up. Whoever had done this had clearly put a lot of effort, not only into the murder itself with all that tape, but also into the aftermath. Like, I don't know how they found this chamber in the wall. I don't know if it was already there. I don't know if they made it for this purpose. But especially buying a specific gun to seal it up. I mean, yeah, a lot of thought was put into this, and a lot of thought was put into the killer not being caught for what they'd done. So one of the first things police did with this second body that had been found, they wanted to find out how long she'd actually been there. They needed to figure out an estimated time of death. So to do this, they brought in some forensic entomologists, which is one of my favourite jobs in the world. Actually, it's a job I really wouldn't like to do myself, but it's really interesting. They're basically insect experts that can figure out how long something has been decomposing based on the types of flies that surround it, how old those flies are, what breeds of flies are around them, because different flies come in at different times throughout the decomposition process. So from the flies that were literally feeding on her dead body, they managed to figure out that this poor girl had been dead since December, and it was now March when they'd found her. So she had been rotting in the wall of that apartment for 4 whole months. They were able to pin her death somewhere between December the 3rd and December 8th, 2001, which is just a month, less than a month, after the previous body was found in Yorkshire. Already at this point, police had a feeling that these two cases were connected. I mean, of course, they look identical. The only thing that was kind of putting them off of that theory was the geographical distance between the two. They couldn't really be sure that these cases were connected until they had a bit more information. And of course, one of the first things they wanted to work on was identifying both of these girls, getting a name, being able to speak to their family. But of course, given how decomposed both of them were when they were found, it was going to be very, very difficult to be able to identify them. Of course, with the first one, like I said, all they had to go on was the fact that she was an East Asian woman, and that was it. And then I guess that blue tape, that was very characteristic of this case. So they really started to investigate that blue tape. They were searching everywhere for what this tape could be, where it could have been sold. And they actually figured out that it was like merch kind of tape sold by 2 London-based artists named Gilbert and George. They made modern art. They had their stuff in a bunch of different exhibitions, modern art museums around the country, including the Tate. And they sold their merch, their kind of gift tape, in the Tate gift shops. If you don't know, Tate is a network of different art museums or art exhibitions up and down the UK. There's 3 down south and then 1 up north. Only about 800 to 850 of these rolls of sellotape had been distributed and sold at this point in time, and they could have come from any one of those 4 Tate museums. There were 2 in London, I believe, 1 in Cornwall, and then the 1 up north is in Liverpool. And the body where the tape was found was in Yorkshire. And North Yorkshire is not exactly local to any of these cities. I mean, the closest one is Liverpool, but even then it's 2 hours away, so it wasn't obvious which one of these museums the tape could have come from. They realised very quickly that it could be quite an impossible task to try to track down this exact roll of sellotape and figure out the exact museum it was bought from and exactly which patron bought the gift tape from the museum. I don't know, like that wasn't really an option. They couldn't do that. So they figured out some other tactics they could use to try to identify this woman. They brought in a forensic anthropologist this time, and they basically study bones and they can figure out from that like so much about the person. They can figure out their ancestry, probably about how old they were when they died, like so much valuable information. Because right now at this point in time, well, actually, they'd managed to figure out that she was 4'11", but that's all they could add to their profile. She was just an East Asian woman that was 4'11". The forensic anthropologist was brought in to look at the bones, and it's absolutely fascinating when you actually get into the science. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm not gonna do that in this video because I don't fully understand a lot of it. So what this lady did, she used an X-ray to scan the victim's body, and she came across a bunch of little bone flakes that had had formed on the victim's sternum. And these flakes are the product of a calcification process in the body. And again, I am not a scientist, so I don't really know what that means. But I do know that this process happens between the ages of 20 and 25. It stops by the time you're 25. And when it stops, all of these flakes disappear and you don't make them again. So when she does this x-ray, she spots these flakes, and that tells the forensic anthropologist that this victim was between the ages of 20 and 25 when they passed away. And that's not all they managed to work out about this victim. They looked at a bunch of other things as well, like the folds of her eyelids, her hairline, the shade and the darkness of her hair. And they managed to pinpoint this woman's ethnicity as either Korean or Southern Chinese. After all of these tests were done, they sent what was left of the woman's body off for an autopsy, and they managed to find that her cause of death was suffocation, which, I mean, they'd already kind of guessed, what with the tape and everything. It seemed like it was going to be suffocation. But what they didn't expect to find was that the woman had also been beaten as part of her ordeal. She had like great big abrasions to her head as well. They pinpointed her actual death to the end of October, somewhere between the 25th and the 28th, and her body would be found in that suitcase just abandoned in Yorkshire about a month later. So she'd been decomposing for a month. The next thing police did was look into the specific suitcase that her body was found in, and they found that this little silver suitcase had been made in South Korea. And this was like their first major lead, because remember, they'd pinpointed this woman as being from either Korea or maybe southern China, and now this specific suitcase was from South Korea. Did that narrow it down even more? Was this woman South Korean? Well, they decided to reach out to the South Korean authorities because that looked like their most promising lead. And little did the Yorkshire police know that as all of this had been going on, there'd been another investigation going on in South Korea looking into the disappearance of a 21-year-old woman. Her family had reported her missing, but she was vacationing abroad at the time in Europe. It seemed like they were on the right track, and so South Korean authorities sent her fingerprints. They had her fingerprints on file for whatever reason. I couldn't actually find out why, but they sent her fingerprints to the English police, and when they did a test on the body, it was confirmed that this was the missing woman that they had been searching for a month. She had been dead in a suitcase, decomposing this whole entire time. 45 days after the discovery of her body, this victim had finally been identified as Miss Jin Hyo Jung. So now that they were armed with this information, they knew who their victim was. Police started campaigning for information 10 times harder. They wanted to find out about this woman's life, about the people that she surrounded herself with, where she lived, what her job was like. So the Yorkshire police travelled down to London, and they all kind of joined forces. They all sat and spoke about what information they had on this case. And actually, the Yorkshire police were quite astounded to hear that London police were working on another disappearance of another South Korean woman. They had been searching for a 22-year-old woman named Miss Song In-hya. They had no leads on it right at this point in time, but within a few weeks, they'd found her, decomposing in the walls of that rental flat in Poplar. So now both dead bodies had been identified, and it was astounding how similar both of these victims were, how similar both of their murders were, how similar both of their life stories had been up until this point. Both of the women were originally from South Korea. They were both very intelligent and ended up coming over to London to do a section of their studies, but they both disappeared whilst living in London. Miss Song was originally studying at the University of Surrey, but something went wrong that meant she had to drop out, and she found herself living in London instead. In late 2001, before she died, she began renting an apartment in Poplar, East London, and it is, of course, the same apartment that she was found buried inside the walls of. And while we don't know her exact social circles at the time of her death, we do know that Miss Song was very outgoing. She was very friendly. She came to London not knowing anyone, and she very quickly made a network. She was very fun-loving, very adventurous, very intelligent, very welcoming. Everyone that met her in London said that she was a great time. She was a great person to be around. Miss Jin's story was very similar. She had also moved away from South Korea to study in Europe. At first, she'd gone to France, and that was where she was doing her main, like, study program. But of course, while she was in France, she was talking to her family back home, and she was like, I kind of want to see the whole of Europe while I'm here. And she might as well. I mean, the flight from Paris to London is just over an hour, so if she's studying in France, she might as well take a trip over to England if she's always wanted to visit. She decided that she was going to get a short-term let in London and just kind of spend a month or two there and just, I don't know, see how she liked it. So Miss Jin came over to the UK. She was 21 years old, and she found a temporary rental flat in Holborn, which is in central London. And that was the last place that Miss Jin was ever seen alive before her body ended up 4.5 hours away in York. It doesn't seem that the two women ever met each other in their lives. Not in South Korea, not when they both moved to London. They both had different social circles, they were doing different studies, and they also just lived in different parts of London. I don't think their paths ever crossed, but they did have very, very similar life stories. It's very interesting. The families were, of course, terribly worried, but they kept kind of coming up with excuses in their heads for this, to explain this. You know, they're very busy girls, they're young, they're living their lives, they've got studies, the time difference, you know, you do kind of try to come up with excuses to make yourself feel better, but this whole time they hadn't heard from them. Although their families didn't worry too much, because they knew that the girls had been making friends out there in London. They knew that they had a bit of a network around them. Miss Song had told her family all about her very caring landlord that had always made sure that she had everything that she needed. His name was Mr. Kim. He was also South Korean, in his 20s, living in London. They had a lot in common, and Miss Song really liked him. They became friends very quickly. So not only was he her landlord and helping her out with a place to stay, he was also her friend. He was her social circle, and a lot of people said that the two of them were very, very close. They would act like brother and sister. Mr. Kim had offered her the apartment to rent right after she dropped out of university, and it's not known how they met or how they came into contact. I really couldn't figure out if they'd done this on some kind of like housing website or if they had mutual friends and it was like a word of mouth recommendation. I really don't know. Mr. Kim had a few rental properties throughout London, like very small flats, and I think that's how he made his money. I think that was his wage every month, was being a landlord. And so, like I say, even though I don't know how the two of them met, he very quickly wanted to help out Miss Song, and he rented her this flat in Poplar. When Miss Song randomly disappeared that winter, like I said, they kind of shared a friend group a little bit at this point in time. And to explain her sudden disappearance, Mr. Kim told them all that she'd gone off to do a hotel management course. She was just moving ahead with her career. It was a new chapter for Miss Song. But the whole time, she was decomposing within the walls of her apartment. And it just so happened that Mr. Kim was also landlord to Miss Jin. He rented her that apartment in Holborn, the place that she was last seen before her death. 4 months before her body was found, that was the last place she was ever seen, at the apartment that she rented from him. And he'd also given her friends some kind of bullshit explanation when she went missing too. He said that a strange man had come by the flat and picked up Miss Jin, and he was going to take her to a nearby station, and he'd tried to ask them where they were going, but they weren't telling him. He said that the two of them just got in a car, they drove away, and he never heard from Miss Jin ever again. So that was that story. But again, the whole time he was telling these bullshit stories, Miss Jin was already dead. She was decomposing in a suitcase on the side of some country lane in Yorkshire. Interestingly, Mr. Kim was actually in contact with Miss Jin's parents back in South Korea. I don't know how they'd gotten in contact, but he told them this same story, that she'd gone off with some man, and they believed him. They didn't have much reason not to believe him, to be fair. They trusted Mr. Kim. They knew that this was their daughter's friend, their daughter's landlord, that she felt very comfortable with. They just hoped that she would return soon, or she would get in contact with them soon, but they never doubted anything that Mr. Kim said to them. And even though Mr. Kim had 2 different young female tenants suddenly disappear from his rental properties in the space of 2 months, no one seemed to notice. No one made any connections between the two girls. That was until months later when both of their bodies turned up, taped up in a very similar way. They'd been suffocated using tape and left to rot in the most odd circumstances, in the most odd places. So London and York's police teams banded together, realising that Mr. Kim was more than likely their murderer in this case. So they start trying to find where he is, of course. And they realised that he's actually in Canada. He had bought a plane ticket only a few days prior to this, and he was on holiday in Canada. At this point in time, they didn't feel like they had enough evidence to literally go over there and extradite him and drag him back over to the UK on suspicion of murder. They wanted to make sure that their evidence was concrete before they did anything like that. So police got a search warrant for Miss Jin's central London Holborn flat because, of course, they'd already seen Miss Song's flat in Poplar. That was literally where they'd found her body. They'd already kind of searched that one. But they wanted to see what was in Miss Jin's flat. And as soon as they went inside that bedroom, they realised that they had found the murder scene. There were these great big blood stains on the ground. It smelled horrific in there. And especially when they opened the wardrobe, there was another huge stain on the ground of the wardrobe. And again, it smelled so badly of decomposition. These stains were tested and they were confirmed to be Miss Jin's blood, which was very interesting because remember, her body was found 4 hours away. So it seemed that she was murdered in her own flat in London and then her body was transported up north. Although the theory is that Miss Jin, of course, after being murdered in her own apartment, they believe that her body was stuffed inside that wardrobe and just stored there for the foreseeable until her killer, probably Mr. Kim, decided to bundle her up in her own suitcase and take her up to Yorkshire. As all of these forensic searches and apartment searches had been going on, other police officers back at the station had been really digging into who Mr. Kim is. They wanted to know who he surrounded himself with, like, you know, just wanted to find out who the hell this man was. They managed to find an ex-girlfriend of his. They got in contact with her and they went down to her apartment to speak with her. And they asked her about this specific blue tape with these men drawn on it. And she was very shocked to hear them bring this up. And she went and she produced a roll of tape. The exact same roll of tape. It was blue, it had men's faces on it, it had these men like standing on it, I don't know, it was the same damn tape though. She said that she had noticed a huge chunk of it had gone missing, but she had no idea where it had gone because she never used the tape and she told everyone in her life never to use this tape because she really liked it. She was saving it for special occasions. Well, it seemed that her boyfriend, Mr. Kim, had stolen that tape from her and killed another woman with it. By now, police had also gone through both of the victims' bank statements to see if their money was being used, if their bank cards were being used, and they had been used since their deaths. It seemed like one of the cards had actually been used to withdraw cash from an ATM right by a car rental company in London, and immediately with that, police had a theory. They went down to that car rental company and they asked them if they had rented a car recently to a Mr. Kim. And they had. He'd paid in cash for a Peugeot that he had returned and apparently everything was fine. You know, the business transaction had gone well. Police asked to see this car and it turns out that Mr. Kim had travelled 655 miles in it, which is about the perfect amount for a trip from London to North Yorkshire and back down. Well, that explained how Miss Jin's body could have ended up all the way up there. It seems he just bought a rental car and just drove and drove and drove and drove into the middle of nowhere until he thought he could ditch this body on the side of the road and it would never get connected back to him. The worst part about that whole disposal plan, especially of Miss Jin's body, is that he had used her own money to drive her dead body up to York. He had left her in her own suitcase. Like, it's just horrid. So police seized the car that Mr. Kim had rented and they did a bunch of forensic tests in there. And what do you know? Miss Jin's blood was found in the boot of the car. The same blood that had been found in her bedroom of the apartment that she rented from Mr. Kim. It's all connecting. So finally, now that they have concrete evidence, police set about extraditing Mr. Kim from Canada. And that was when they discovered they didn't actually need to do that, because turns out he had bought a ticket home himself. He was just coming back of his own accord. Of course, he had no idea at this point in time in Canada that police had found the body in the wall of his rental flat. He had no idea what he was coming back to. He didn't know that he'd been found out. So police decided to not rush or risk anything. They were just going to let Mr. Kim voluntarily bring himself home, and then they were just going to intercept him as soon as he arrived, and they could arrest him then. So they did. As soon as they got the chance, they arrested him on suspicion of both the murders. They took him back to the police station for questioning, and he was so uncooperative. He had nothing to say to them. He literally had nothing to say. He denied all involvement and didn't answer a single other question. But when a DNA sample was taken from Mr. Kim and it was tested on DNA found on both Miss Jin and Miss Song's body, it was a match. He was, of course, their murderer. Mr. Kim was 29 years old at the time. Not too much older than the victims, so it makes sense why they would trust and befriend this man. He was another young South Korean living in London. They had a lot in common. They would have spoken the same language. Things would have just felt a lot more natural, a lot more understanding between them and another young South Korean than it would any other friend that they met. Mr. Kim had actually lived in South Korea pretty much all his life, but after a failed marriage, he decided to move to England, and he started up a university course, very quickly dropped out of that, and then went into landlording full time. I'm not entirely sure how he had so much money, because London flats are expensive and he had quite a few. Maybe he had a lot of money back in Korea before he moved or something, I'm not sure. But that was actually how he would meet most of his friends and the people that he spent time with in London. He would rent his flats to them, including Miss Jin and Miss Song. Mr. Kim was known to be a very charming man. Not necessarily in a creepy way. Apparently it actually wasn't in a creepy way. He was just very friendly and very kind and very attentive, very trustworthy, it seemed. Nobody ever seemed to have a problem with him or complaints about him. Genuinely, from the outside, Mr. Kim seemed like a perfectly normal, good man. And that's one of the biggest reasons this case is so disturbing to me, is that it makes you wonder how many of these nice, normal people that you surround yourself with could actually be depraved on the inside. They could actually have some dark secrets. Literally some bodies in their wall, and you wouldn't actually know. What's that statistic that the average person walks past like 36 murderers in their lifetime and you have no idea? That terrifies me. My point is that we don't always know people like we think we do. And that seems the case for everyone that knew Mr. Kim in London and befriended him and trusted him. He was a multiple murderer that whole time. And one of the worst parts of these crimes is that there's still no obvious motive for why he did this to these two poor women. Like, was it sexual in nature? Maybe, probably. They were two young, defenseless women. But I guess from the way that their bodies were found, I believe they were both naked, which is often a hint in itself that there would have been some level of sexual motive there. There definitely seems to be something of a money motive to these crimes, given the fact that Mr. Kim used both of the girls' bank cards and got cash out of their accounts after they both died. So there's a high chance that he would have had to have tortured that information out of the women while they were still alive. He needed to get that information from them, and he wouldn't have been able to get it while they were dead. And that makes a lot of sense. You know, there were those abrasions, the women had been beaten, like specifically on their heads. It's now all adding up. There were maybe even some worse things that happened during their whole ordeal that didn't show up on the autopsy. It seemed that the girls suffered long, excruciating deaths, suffocating with this tape around their body, but he left their eyes so that they could see as this was all going on. It makes me so upset to think about what those women's final minutes, hours could have looked like. And he had used his victims' money to fund his trip to Canada. That's how he'd bought that plane ticket. That's how he was living out there, was just on the cash that he had gotten out from the girls' cards. So while I think the money motive is definitely there, I personally think that there was probably a sexual motive there. They were both two beautiful young women. They didn't know anyone in London. They were easy targets for him. Finally, when the case went to trial, Mr. Kim actually pled not guilty to both of the murders. Because manslaughter essentially means that he is saying, yes, I am the reason that she's dead, but I didn't mean to kill her. I didn't intend to murder her. How could you possibly say that when he had tied a balaclava of tape around her face so tightly that her eyeballs bulged out of their sockets? How on earth can you say that you didn't intend to kill that person? Of course, the manslaughter plea was rejected because it was fucking stupid, and I'll be the first to tell you that. And how many times have I said, I'm not a lawyer, I don't understand the law? That I do understand, and that was stupid. Eventually, Mr. Kim was found guilty of both of the murders in 2003, but he never gave an explanation. He's never actually admitted it. He still says that he had nothing to do with it. He's never given the families any closure. He was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 23 years and 10 months. Of course, he's still in right now. Justice had been served in the case of Miss Jin and Miss Song, but it was still kind of looming over detectives. They didn't feel quite right about Mr. Kim. What if these weren't the only two people he'd ever killed? Throughout his life, he had travelled all over the world. And I mean, the way that he carried out both of these two murders that we know about was so calculated and cold. It really didn't seem like he was a first-time killer. He'd thought of absolutely everything in the aftermath, and he was so creative with everything, taping them into a balaclava, suffocating them that way, putting her in a fucking hole in his wall, and buying a gun to seal it up. He had really thought about everything. And he was so creatively sadistic that, to me, it seems obvious that he derived pleasure from doing that to these women. There are plenty of other ways he could have stolen money from them, but he enjoyed torturing and killing by the looks of things. It's scary to think that he could have been committing murders like this all over the world and just traveling and getting away from them every time. As of right now, it is just a theory that Mr. Kim could be a serial killer. I don't think any active investigations are going on into that, but I think it's something worth thinking about, and I think it's something probably worth investigating if police can be bothered, or if they have the time, shall I say. But for the meantime, Mr. Kim is locked up behind bars where he can't hurt anyone else, thank God. And that is all I have for this case. Thank you very, very much for watching. I really appreciate you spending time with me today. Thanks again to Casetify for sponsoring this video. Remember, if you want to get 10% off of your order, you can go to casetify.com/Eleanor, or just click the link down below in the description. The discount will be automatically applied at checkout, so thank you so much to Casetify. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please leave a thumbs up on this video or comment down below, share it with a friend. Engaging with the video really helps to push it out into YouTube's algorithm, and I would really, really appreciate that. I would be eternally grateful. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. If you want to watch another one of my videos, there'll be one on screen right now, or you can click the little circle with my face in to subscribe to my channel. We post true crime content and other weird, freaky content all the time. So with that being said, I'll see you in the next one. Bye!